video number 8. Wow! Thank you so much for sticking with me as I attempt to relate the history of the town of Mont Vernon and its town hall. At the end of video 7, we had a population that had peaked and was beginning to dwindle as opportunities moved away from pre-industrial farm towns like ours. If it wasn't for the brainchild of this amazing man, Mont Vernon as a town may have ceased to exist altogether. Say hello to Franklin Otis Kittredge. He came from a family that had farmed Mont Vernon's rocky soils for almost 100 years. Perhaps this is part of what inspired him to start thinking outside the farming box. Franklin was good at spotting assets, and he saw plenty in our hilltop farm town. Like many other town citizens, he understood that education was the best way to improve the future, not only for children, but for their communities as well. Mr. Kittredge was one of the founders of the Appleton Academy and opened a boarding house for out-of-town students and teaching staff. One summer, he found himself troubled by the rooms left empty for the break, just when Mont Vernon was at its best. That's when he had an idea. F.O. Kittredge printed up a pile of brochures describing our beautiful town, then sent them down to Boston's more prosperous neighborhoods. The boys hired to deliver those brochures took Milford's latest and greatest mode of transportation, the train. Beginning in 1850, the railroad in Milford made the daily trip to and from Boston in about 3 hours each way. This meant that, among other things, the folks could hop a train after lunch in Beantown and be on our lovely hilltop town for a delicious farm-to-table dinner. Franklin Kittredge's summer boarding house was an immediate hit. He enlarged it several times and still could not keep up with the demand he had created. In 1857, he enlarged the building again and called it the Mont Vernon House. No, I did not mispronounce. Being the stellar businessman that he was, and he was, he believed that changing the name from Mont to Mount would help increase interest in our town. Remember, George Washington's home was named Mount Vernon. Kittredge was so adamant about that U, he even finagled it into the name of our first post office, much to the consternation of many residents who preferred the U-less version of the name. In the end, those folks won out. After 30 years, Mont Vernon citizens fired that U, and we resumed the proper name bestowed by our first town families. While the post office changed its name to Mont Vernon, you can still find the Mount spelling on some of the old maps and postcards, thanks to this guy and his marketing ideas. And we will never really know how much Kittredge's U contributed to the popularity of our town, but his idea of hosting definitely did catch on in a big way. And this is how America's Gilded Age began rubbing elbows with Mont Vernonites. The city folks fell in love with our hilltop farms, pine groves, and expansive views afforded by our quaint little village. 3 years after the Mont Vernon House opened for business, Hillsborough House was built. The Bellevue began receiving guests in 1871. Bigger houses around the village or farms opened their doors to paying guests, and still the demand for summer housing grew. Throughout the second half of the 1800s, some of the biggest names from Boston, New York, and even Baltimore made the trip to Mont Vernon for the summer season. Whole families would come, bringing their servants and their citified expectations. With these first-class people in mind, a group of investors constructed the hotel for which Mont Vernon may be the most famous. But just when it was ready for business in March of 1891, it burned to the ground. The investors rallied and had it rebuilt and started receiving guests 3 months later. On July 6, 1891, the Grand opened for a 30-year run of business. Many folks that took the train from the Milford station rode the stage up the hill to the Grand. Once they were there, they would find the office in one part of the first floor rotunda, along with a reception room and a dining room which could seat 200 people. Above this, the next 3 floors were built with all the rooms along the outside walls, with wide corridors that created a central open space 77 feet high. On the top of the hotel, a 2-story observatory provided guests with views up to 60 miles in every direction. Piazzas, or porches, around the first floor also had views aplenty, as well as room for walking or sitting. Grand Hotel guests enjoyed 3 bowling alleys, pool tables, croquet, and tennis on courts built nearby. There were many fine walks to be had around town or in those pine groves, and there was even a 9-hole golf course with its own clubhouse. During the second half of the 1800s, Mont Vernon's summer residents increased in number, but the church they attended every Sunday, still located on the 2nd floor of our town hall, was woefully neglected and becoming more of a concern with each passing year. The idea of giving the building over to the church and constructing a new town hall did not gain traction. However, 2 well-to-do ladies in town donated $6,000 for the building of a new church. The idea caught on, with summer residents and former citizens making donations along with townfolk. In less than a year, the needed funds were raised, and in 1896, the town celebrated the opening of their new Victorian shingle-style Congregational church. The creation of the new church brought about another series of renovations to the old meeting house. We'll talk more about those changes in our next video.